list of middle schools that are in process, there's a variety of towns that are in doing that. But one of the things that they have is they have a spreadsheet of all the middle school feasibility studies going back to 2012. So, and it doesn't list separate categories for drawings or hazmat or hazardous and geo. It just says feasibility study, and the cost there, it goes from 448,000 up to 1.1 million. There's one outlier, 1.1 million for Beverly for some reason, and I couldn't figure out why that was. I know it's a very large school. But the average is about $500,000 for what looks to be a feasibility study. It may or may not include the owner's project manager because they have separate lists for owner's project manager, but that goes from 105,000 up to 360. So if we just look at the average for a feasibility study under the Massachusetts State Building Authority, it's around 500,000 and about 150,000 for an owner's project manager. So I also think we should be looking at these numbers and not inflating them. And so, if they need more money, they can come back.
I mean, we've studied those numbers extensively and then talked with a number of owners, project managers, and other offices, school offices that are building right now. So we tried to bring you very informed. I think the numbers we brought you are within those bandwidths based on what we broke out for you in the memo Jared put together. So we're using that same data. I just want to be sure we make that point that we aren't arbitrarily picking numbers. We're doing our best to research them and make them informed.
So just if I could finish up. So I believe that we should not pull it apart, that we should give them the flexibility to move forward. I think that, and I will refute a little bit, Phil, about the high school, because indeed we did apply a couple times and we got shut down, and we were all set to proceed with a renovation until Tim Cahill came, and it did change things that very suddenly. So I don't want to call it luck, but we were a little bit lucky there. In any event, even back then, 10 years ago, we knew the middle school needed to be dealt with. We thought we could get along for 10 years without doing much but maintenance and putting some money into it. Obviously, things have changed, and some of the systems have gotten worse. So, like others on the committee, I think we should proceed with the building of the school. The real question to me for the town is timing and the debt service, and what makes the most sense. I thought Johanna made some good points and provided some valuable information. From my standpoint, it almost seems like if we had a separate group, and I know we've talked about a town-wide building committee or capital committee that looks at these things, but that would look at the costs of the middle school, look at what the costs of waiting are, and validate and verify all of those components so that we really have an informed data set to make a decision on about whether to support the building in the most expeditious manner, whether we wait a year or two for the debt to come down. I think that would help a lot. And I don't know how we could do that, but as a town citizen, I'd feel better if that kind of information was vetted outside of the school committee, outside of the finance committee, but having some sort of group to just take a look at the timing of the debt and looking at the other projects.
But wasn't that the idea behind a permanent building committee?
Yeah, there are two different things. There's two different proposals, Carl.
Yeah, so that's my comments.
So I had that same thought, Peter, and taking the information that Joanna sent out this afternoon with respect to the decline, and the termination of some of the other schools over the next few years, and fitting that together, with sort of the starting point that we're at, according to ClearGov, is we're 134% above, the peer group average for, debt, construction servicing, and then trying to do a best guess, so how those two lines move forward, some sort of projection of, where we are going forward would be very helpful. But I keep coming back to the fact that we're starting from a very high level already, which in my mind, sort of suggests maybe, although nobody, or a lot of people, would like to fast track it. Maybe we should slow it down a little bit. And Phil's suggestion sort of represents a compromise in terms of, some progress, at a slower pace.
It just seems if we had that data, that would help us quite a bit. And I almost see separating those two, because I think we ought to give them the flexibility to proceed if that's the answer, and not slow it down by separating the stuff, but at the same time getting the data on the debt service globally within Concord, so that we can really figure this out and say this is the best time. Because if the cost of waiting, if we're indeed it's going to cost us $8 million a year, and that's going to outweigh the debt service in a way, then the answer is simple: let's get going. Or the answer may be we want to wait 2 years or 3 years, because then the curve will start bending down.
So can I just make one other comment about compromise and about your thought? And that is, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I think, just as a political matter, asking for a $1.5 million feasibility study, and it comes out at town meeting that it's not really a feasibility study, but it's 4 phases, is not a politically good idea, because I think it could very well fail. There's skepticism, not your fault, but there's skepticism because representations have been made in the past. And so I'm trying to compromise at something that I think would pass and could pass at the ballot after that. So one of the reasons I'm suggesting this, as opposed to just opposing this in its entirety, because it's too much to the debt, is this is a way to slow it down a little bit, give us time to study the capital plan, and but at least move the ball forward.
I have a different concern for the town, and that is that we as a town have not made financial preparations to really face up to this. And typically when we've been sidling up to a big debt issuance, we've put aside money to mitigate future peaks in stabilization funds, et cetera. We have done none of that, and we need to get on the stick and start putting away multiple million per year out of either free cash or generate it or tax, raise the taxes now, because that's the way we sort of mitigate the abrupt and huge tax increases that we will face. And if you go back and look at the way in which we've serviced our debt, it has been through prudent management and set-asides of stabilization funds prior to the point at which we start issuing bonds and getting into the weeds of actually having to pay the debt service. So, we need to really step up as a community, recognizing that at some point we're going to build a new middle school, and yesterday start putting aside stabilization money. That's and we haven't done that yet. We're not ready. So this is the minute that we go down the road, and should town meeting approve this article and get us in the mode of going down this road, I think the finance committee should be recommending strongly that the town begin to raise those taxes almost immediately, even if bonding and et cetera have not yet been issued, because we need to get used to it, and we also need to put it aside so that we can spend it in the future in order to just sort of shave the top off those mountains.
Yeah, so I wasn't going to bring this up in this context, but it's relevant. And I think Heather can help me with this one, but if I'm not mistaken, the idea that somehow a surplus Peabody school could be monetized to help defray some of these costs, I think, came up independent in your first presentation over at the Alcott School, independent of me, I believe.
Yes, somebody brought it up.
Somebody
So
brought
I
it
don't remember who made all the comments now.
Wasn't me, though. Yeah. So along those lines, that's come up a couple of times. And
that's not money that's available until the other building is built and
Fair enough.
decommissioned. Yes,
Fair enough.
So it's not
that's
really
fair enough. There can be a plan for it.
Yeah.
We could plan ahead. Don't forget that part.
Do we have any flexibility how we structure the debt for the school? Could we extend the term in some way? Maybe carry.
Pay more.
Well, you pay more. Well, but can you smooth it out by extending the term? Yes. What is the term
So-
that you have, when you
So
do-
don't we have a policy, Carrie, where 60% of the debt gets paid off in some, we have a very credit rating friendly policy for dealing with these things that you can articulate better than I can.
We do have a policy that is exactly, as you had said, where 60% is paid off in the first 5 years and 40% in the second 5 years for debt that we finance over 10 years. But that is not the way that we finance building projects. School building projects under state law can be financed for a maximum of 30 years. The town, with the elementary schools, finance those projects over 20, and the high school is financed over 25.
So the figures that you gave us would show $1,000 hit on the median tax bill if we were to move ahead with school and other municipal projects, right? Do you remember?
No, that was the school, that was a $90 million school project
Right.
over 25 years,
Over
was
25,
around
okay.
$1,000.
If I could add one thing to Peter's question of why now, I think if we were to do the whole scope of what we've proposed, we'd be talking about known quantities, a known design, like a lot of the unknowns would get factored out. And I think that would give us a different discussion to be having, because we would know how much cost of a building we've all agreed to would have impact over. And as we go to that next phase, which has to be a town vote, we could fill in all these answers with better information. I think that's the other part we're circling on. So to me, that's one other really strong reason to try to do all of this now. And then the timing can get sorted out as we have the plan more solidly in place and know a lot more information.
So what does this do to the, so what does this do to the 5-year plan? To keep the taxes, with the,
This would show up in our 5-year projection,
So-
once it's
taxes.
decided, yes, but only after it's decided, so. The only comment I want to add is, we had a discussion here in late January about the impact of the debt from this project in combination with the debt from other projects, capital projects the town manager has in his capital facilities plan. And as a result of that concern and a study that the finance director did for us, we suggested to the select board that a committee look at all of these capital facilities that have been mentioned as being required for completion or initiation within the next 5 years, and make a decision as to what the priorities should be. I don't think that's been done, and unless my fellow committee members tell me that we've changed our mind, I think we still feel that should be done, even if it only results in saying that, yes, we need a middle school right now, but we're making an affirmative decision that the other capital facilities will be put off for 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years. But there's a need for the town to face the totality of those planned facilities and come up with a plan. So
No one disagrees with that.
right now, we seem to be rushing headlong into planning and building a middle school, and that's it. And it's not going to be done in a vacuum. We really have to do it in the context of everything else that the town needs to do. And if indeed the town decides that we're going to put off the public works facility, and we're going to put off the public safety building, and we're going to put off town administrative offices, that's fine. But we need to do that in an affirmative way. We need to do it with our eyes open. And I'm not really,
No, none of us disagree with that. We're here advocating for the
Sure.
kids that we serve, and that's your job to make the big picture come together too. So we want to be part of that process, whatever way this all goes. So.
I think the point, which, excuse me, I'm going to jump in here, okay? I agree both with what Dean was saying and with Tom, what you're saying, and that the proactive planning seems to be the caboose on this thing. That we're going ahead, we're creating a committee to be the building committee for the middle school and so on, and yet we really haven't created a capital planning committee or a capital plan, and we've also been talking about a permanent building committee, which is not the same as a capital planning committee or a specific building committee. But anyway, one thing I'm when this thing was in the warrant, we didn't realize that there were all these little pieces to it, and that it was not just a feasibility study. Although if I understand that hazardous materials, geo-environmental piece of it, that really is essentially part of a feasibility study.
It's the contingency, so you can do the testing that we need to do.
Well,
Right.
okay, yeah, it's a budget for that, but you need to do the borings and all that sort of stuff. So that's absolutely part of a feasibility study. Can you just clarify, is the owner's project manager, is that just for this piece of it, or is that for the whole?
It's just for this piece.
Just for this piece, okay. The other thing, though, I'll just observe, I've never seen, the feasibility study typically is broken out as a separate contract from the final design. Quite often, different designer, and then it goes out on the street again, and maybe that person can be selected. Used to be you couldn't even use the person that did the feasibility study, or the firm that did the feasibility study, but now you can hire them. But I have never seen, and I don't quite understand the wisdom of, if what you're talking about is truly a schematic design, which would have, like most of the mechanical systems and structural system would be pretty much laid out, okay? It's not all detailed and so on, but when they talk about a schematic design, it is the design. And the problem that breaking out the schematic design, and you're gonna have that schematic design, then you're gonna hire another design team. They're not gonna, to implement a schematic design, that is, if it's truly a schematic design, they're not going to want to be responsible for that. It's usually feasibility study, break, you've got your budget, you know what your appropriation is. That's the way the state does it. They do the study, and then they do the appropriation, and then they send the thing out for the schematic design development, construction documents, construction administration, all that. I don't know how a new design team comes in and picks up with a schematic design that's true
fine.
Schematic design that's been done, as opposed to a piece of a feasibility study that was really more of a conceptual design.
So when you're getting your architect for the grand scale building project, those architects are bidding on designing the school that's in the schematic design. So it's all a package. For the actual build, the design work's gonna be based on the schematic design. That won't be a discussion point.
Well, okay, there are liability issues, I've never seen it done that way.
Chris?
I just have one comment and one question. So I echo your comments. I think it's really important that the town figure out what its capital project plan is going to be long-term and how we're going to fund it and what the priorities are. And I think the finance committee really has to push for that. It's critical. And two, I remember, Carl, you showing around to the committee that I think, was it 2002? There was a capital plan, a report. I read it. It was quite good. We didn't do anything with it. And we're sitting here now
The
you
middle
know,
school was slated for 2020 in that plan.
was it? Okay.
It does
But-
happen
but-
to be.
But there was no plan for that, right, Lori? So,
Well, I can't, I
no, I'm
don't
just
know what
saying,
happened
that
since then. I
we
just,
had
it
one,
was
but
there.
we
It
did
was the high
nothing
school
with it.
plan, you know?
I don't know that.
I
It
don't
was
know.
a two-phase thing, the high
Yeah.
school, it was not
Yeah.
done that way at all.
So, just to remind ourselves, we had the impetus before, we didn't have the discipline to follow through with it, and we need to do that, because you can't keep coming back asking for buildings, you know, when all of a sudden they're needed. It's just too hard, and I understand that you are where you are, but to me, it makes no
I
sense
don't
from a
disagree
planning
with you.
perspective at all. So that's my comment. My question is, just to go back to the numbers for this particular article, Phil mentioned that the average was around $500,000 for similar feasibility studies under MSBA, if I have the word of it right name, is the acronym is. And ours is around $1.5 million or so.
Well, if you break it out, our feasibility
That's
number
what I'm
is
trying to understand.
500,000.
400.
So it's
400.
because, okay, so it's because the components are different, so that's what I was trying to understand.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Right, so 500, it's 400, it is 500 for the feasibility.
So-
500 for the schematic.
500 for the-
400
yeah.
feasibility,
Right.
300 for the OPM, and 300 for the
Yeah,
contingencies.
yeah. So they're within the bandwidth of what Phil's been looking for.
Maybe you guys should settle
So, to move this on,
Seriously.
I would like to move that we support affirmative action on the article, but at the level of 750, for a feasibility study and a owner's project manager. I will just have one other comment about that, and that is this, the
environmental piece.
the hazmat and environmental are separately broke out things in the MSBA things. None of them cost 300,000 or 400,000. It's about 100,000 average, and they're also called reimbursable costs by MSBA. So it presupposes we're not going to get MSBA funding if we fund that now. If though we get lucky and get approved in December or even the following December, those are things that MSBA will pay for, but not if we do them on our own. So for that reason, I'm proposing that we fund a basic feasibility study that allows us to move forward, and an extra $250,000 for an owner's project manager, and if that is the beginning of some environmental borings, that's up to the school building committee, if it truly they want to consider it part of the feasibility study. The same
So-
number that Lester voted for.
As a point of procedure, I don't know if any of you who are older and smarter than I am can tell me what's the precedent for effectively amending the article in our.
No, we're just voting on our recommendation. So our recommendation would be, and my motion is, which needs a second, that our recommendation be that we support affirmative action, but in the amount of 750,000, not 1.5 million.
Could we amend the article on the floor to do what you're
We
saying?
could move to amend the article on the floor, but
To do what- right.
the first thing would be the recommendation of the FinCom in response to the article, which would be for 1.5 million, unless the school committee goes back and says, maybe you're right, maybe this is a compromise. But anyways, we need a second for my motion.
So, do we have a second for that
Wait,
motion?
one question, would public comment be allowed after the vote or before the vote on this matter?
Usually before,
You know,
just before.
I think if you.
well, we have a motion on the table right now, so we have to dispose
We
of that.
want the
and then-
discussion on the
Right,
motion.
right. So, yes, we will invite public comment before we, so is there a second for Phil's motion?
Yes, I will second that motion.
Okay. Is your comment germane to this particular motion?
Yes.
All right, come forward, please.
Thank you. Miguel Echevarri, 255 Commonwealth Ave. We should probably look at the original language as we're considering the additions that, they want to add with the schematic designs and such. Because let's read it. I'll read it to you guys right now. It's going to be expended other direction of the school committee. That's changing. Okay, but it's for a feasibility study to consider the construction of a new middle school. So I'm a bit confused because it seems like they've already decided to move ahead with a new middle school. And a feasibility study here seems to imply that it's to actually inform on a decision that someone, and who's that someone? I assume it'd be town meeting, so.
Can I stop you and ask members of the school committee and the superintendent, do you have the language that's actually going to be moved with you? And
We have,
It's not confirmed.
we are still talking, in terms of any changes we may or may not make, I have a talk with the town moderator early tomorrow morning. It's still a discussion, evolving piece, so that
I
will
don't want
come.
to spend a lot of time discussing the motion as it's in the warrant right now, if there are going to be substantial changes that
Understood,
affect.
but the one thing though is that this is substantially different what they're proposing. And it would have also been nice as a comment if all of this had been, they've had months to give us this information. So at the FinCom hearing, I think everyone knows I'm not shy here. It would have been nice for me, for people to be able to ask a bunch of questions, because I've got a bunch of questions now. But the taxpayers, the residents, the town meeting voters won't be able to really have any input on this or even find anything out because they're bringing this information out to us very late. And in this particular instance, it seems like a feasibility study. It's inconsistent with what they were saying, that it's part of a land thing that's, they've already made a decision and they're moving forward. But here, the original language was for a study to consider construction. But now we're talking about, well, that's already assumed that we're moving forward. Construction's kind of happening with all these, starting off with the schematic designs and stuff. So it's just, I'm not actually against this, but this type of stuff bothers me, and it does move towards the motion because, I would like to see that this amount get cut back to whatever, 750, because I think it would have a better chance of passing. But then again, though, I don't really know what the impact is because it sounds like the other stuff is intimately tied into it. So anyways, that was my comment. Is the original language is pertinent because they're recommending, what they're recommending really contradicts it. So, and what he's saying is kind of, well, let's give them what they want. They want a feasibility study. So let's give them a feasibility study and give them the 750 for the feasibility study. Which also, to another question, is what was quoted to me, I believe, on the feasibility study was 500,000, but now it's 400,000. And we're kind of steamrolling ahead on this stuff. And they don't see, yeah, it seems to change a lot. I mean,
There's still fire.
no, I was just showing 400.
in Jared's memo of
Right.
But it was 500 what was sent to me. So
Okay.
we are steamrolling forward.
We've
So
got
thank
it.
you very much, though.
Appreciate your point. Committee members, discussion on,
Can I make a public comment also?
sure.
Sorry. Should I come up here? Thank you. Hi, Heather Bout, 93 Alden Road, member of the Concord School Committee. Speaking on their behalf in place of Joanna Boynton, who's our chair. I'm also the chair of the Facilities Planning Committee that's been looking into the middle school for a couple of years. So I just wanted to clarify a couple of things since Miguel made a couple of very valid points about the fact that there's been confusion about this term feasibility study. So I wanted to, first and upfront, apologize that that term has been confusing. It was never meant to be. The only reason that we use the term feasibility study is that that's a term that the MSBA uses, and so we were trying to stay consistent with that. As soon as we realized that there was confusion, we have tried to go out and spread the word and be very clear that this is a feasibility study and design, and that's what the request is for. That's also why we're changing the wording. In terms of the consider a middle school, I think it's a question here, and again, it's clarity, but there's a difference between consider if versus consider how. The consider if we need a middle school, excuse me, was part of the facilities study that we conducted 2 years ago. And that was really why we conducted that, to figure out both the existing conditions of the building and if we need something new. And so we did put the funds into that. So I think, Andrea, you asked how much it was. I think it was around 96 point something million. Don't quote me exactly. We put funds into that to figure out for sure if we do need to do something. And the conclusion coming out of that was that we do. And so I just want to clarify, it's not a matter of us rushing forward without having made that decision. It's that we did a study to get there. The feasibility study is to consider how we build a middle school on the Sanborn site. So we really are trying to be very clear and transparent here. There are a lot of terms that are confusing. But this particular request for the 1.5 million is for the feasibility study to consider how it can be built on the land, and the design to see what that schematic design looks like, because the two really go from one to the next. And I think one point to clarify
They
is
don't go
that
from one to the next. They are one and the same. This is what I just don't understand. And
Phil, could you,
What-
Phil. Sorry. Could you, let's just let,
I was just going to say, in terms of going from one to the next, the feasibility and design, so to your point, one and the same, they are part of the same phase. It's one and the same.
yeah,
And
a
the
feasibility
MSBA
study includes a design.
Right, the MSBA calls it phase one. There's really no decision point after the feasibility study of do we go forward with the schematic design? Because it's not a study of should we build a middle school? We've already done that. It's a study of how do we.
okay.
So to do one and then wait to do the next, there's no inflection point that you would do anything different other than continue.
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wait, let's, thank you.
Thank you.
Carl, did you have something you'd like to say?
Well, I think usually at the end of a feasibility study, then the object of that is to really develop what the budget for the building and the budget that the final designer should be working toward. So they have to stay within that budget. And so it does include a design, what's sometimes called a schematic design, although a schematic design is really the first stage of the final design process. And so the confusion wouldn't matter if it weren't tied to several $100,000
Right.
one way or the other.
Right.
And that's really where the issue,
Yep.
I think, is. And so I if you're going for a full-blown schematic design, and then you're going to come back and bring in another design team to essentially start, they're you can start with the design from a feasibility study, but to start with the design from somebody else's schematic design, and if it's a real schematic design, you're gonna have to rely on their calculations for all the mechanical systems, for all the structural and stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay. Christine?
I guess I'd ask this to the committee. Do we all agree that the town citizens think that the decision was already made, that we need a new middle school?
No, I don't think.
I don't think they
that's
do.
what they're saying.
Okay,
I don't
'cause-
think that's what they're saying. I think they're saying that the school committee decided that they think they need a new school.
And did they tell anybody?
And the timing of that is up to the town.
Okay,
As
but
far
did
as
they
when-
tell anyone?
What?
So was that made public that they had decided based on the fine
I
core
think
study?
in this process is how they're telling the town. By coming forward with, okay, now we want some money for the first step, and then based on that, we might come forward with the second step. But I think,
I think that's what leads to some of the confusion, because I don't think, to me.
Am I-
Well, I think the Feingold study led the school
Did I
committee
say
to
that correctly?
file multiple
Did I say that?
iterations with MSBA, like, you gotta get going here. So they're 0 for 2, and so now they're back to come back.
I heard what you said, Christine. It's like, well, you don't decide, the town decides, right?
Well,
Whether we
No,
buy.
I'm just trying to understand just communication-wise,
Yeah.
what had happened, so.
Yeah, okay.
So Tom, so I understand what Heather is saying, but I actually think, again, if you go to a town meeting and say, we've already decided this is to proceed with the building of middle school, that is a mistake. I think for one, the town meeting warrant article, and again, this is up to the moderator, doesn't say this is to build a new middle school. It's to consider a feasibility study, consider construction. So I don't think the moderator would say, well, you can modify that to approve building of a new middle school, but that sounds like what you're suggesting. So
No,
I
I
think the
wasn't
town
suggesting a
thinks,
whole
Did
school,
you
sorry.
express the opinion you didn't think the moderator would
Would-
allow that change?
to change from considering to approving construction of a new middle school. I think that she would say that's not within the scope of the article. That's why the article's printed and sent out to the town members. You can't vary the entire meaning of an article that significantly between mailing it and showing up at town meeting. It has to be within the scope of the original article. You can change wording.
Agreed, correct.
um,
Agreed. I wasn't saying we were approving a full school. I totally
Okay,
agree with you.
it sounded like that.
All right.
But anyways, the other thing is, I don't even know if the moderator would approve changing feasibility study to feasibility study, hazmat, drawings, and,
Schematic
Yeah.
designs.
So I've had that
Schematics.
conversation with Carmen, and there has been legal agreement from town council and district council that the original article was allowed for the scope of what we proposed. What we're working on now is clarifying the language so the community is very clear. But the original article
Good
does
idea,
cover the
good
scope.
idea. I would just say, the other thing is that NSBA does separate feasibility study separately, separate category, not part of the feasibility study, is hazardous materials and geotech. And as I said, they cost about 100 to 200,000 for those on the average. And they separate the drawings, which are the next phase, or the design development, which is the next phase. But those would all be reimbursed by MSBA if we get approval by the MSBA.
Okay, are we ready for vote on Phil's motion? If so, I would ask our ever-patient, incredibly accurate scribe to read back.
Motion which was seconded by John to recommend affirmative action for the article at the level of $750,000 for a feasibility study, a basic feasibility study, and the OPM, in order to allow the project to move forward.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Can I
We're
I'll be quick. I'm just reflecting, and I'm thinking that given the confusion that has risen about this, and I confess to be a little confused too with the wording of the article. I actually am rethinking this and thinking in terms of getting the support at town meeting that Phil's motion probably does make sense.
Okay.
Well, I'll add that there's nothing to restrain the school committee from calling us back to a special town meeting to just keep the ball rolling. If there's some stopgap that needs to be filled, then we need to move forward. And they've built the momentum. There's nothing to stop the town meeting from voting for the next phase for the schematic and the drawings.
I would just say though that I remember at the last year's special town meeting, some people were a little bit disturbed that it seemed we were calling special town meetings to approve spending that wasn't approved at the original town meeting. So calling a special town meeting to ask for more money sometimes backfires. If you remember, we spent $1.6 million at our special town meeting last year, and I know that there's a lot of people that think that that's not what special town meeting should be for.
So just one quick comment.
No,
you're right.
sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I just, to clarify what Dean said, it would actually be the school building committee that would be coming back to the special town meeting, not the school committee.
Okay.
Okay. I have a comment, and that is that I was initially not voting against your motion, but in consideration of the fact that the school committee cannot simply show us a brief, concise document that explains exactly what is supposed to happen in sequence, makes me think that we probably ought to support your motion. And so I will. So, further comment? No. Okay. All in favor of Phil's motion? Opposed? abstentions? Did you get them? Christine and Mary.
Christine and
were
Mary.
opposed.
Phil, did you
Right.
vote?
Oh, yes, I
He just assumed.
did. No, I agree. It wasn't a race.
Okay, I think that is our disposition on that article. So we're voting affirmative action with modification.
At the level of.
Won't that be an amendment?
It would have to be an amendment.
It would have to be, if they were to send me an amendment, I don't
1.5,
think it would
yeah.
probably be our job to call for
Okay.
the amendment, we're just making.
No, actually, I
recommendations.
checked today, and the finance committee can amend.
Okay?
We can amend.
All right, so we are now moving on to Article 18. Thank you very much, school committee
Thank you.
folks.
Good to see you again.
Great to see you. Always a pleasure.
Thank you all.
So Article 18, having listened to many comments from members of the public, both pro and con Article 18, and listening to opinions expressed by my sage fellow committee members, I'm going to suggest for discussion that we vote to not move this article this year,
I second.
and that we keep working on the concept and hope to take some action in the same vein at some future date. But I think the sort of warts and hairs on it as it sits right now renders it
Unfeasible.
problematic and imprudent to move. So I would entertain a motion that we vote to not move this article.
I'll move that we withdraw Article
I'll
18.
second. Can I just say one thing, Tom?
Wait,
I move that we withdraw Article 18. Is that
Okay.
right? Is that-
Second.
And he
If you
seconded.
don't move
Okay.
it,
So now it's discussion.
yes.
Yes. So I agree, but I think it's a worthwhile concept, and I don't see any reason why you can't ask the moderator for an opportunity to address a town meeting at the beginning of the town meeting, perhaps summarize all of our significant recommendations, like the recommendations on the school budget and the, and even this article we just voted on, and then mention and give a short presentation on our recommendations for a sustainable growth rate without asking for a vote of any kind, but just saying this is something that we've come up with and we'd like to have it discussed, and we're going to continue to discuss it. But you could at least make this presentation, have some slides, 5 minutes, and explain the concept and get the town meeting thinking about it.
Which would be great if does the town moderator permit presentations on non-article issues?
I don't know.
I think we
I don't-
just
I
need
don't-
to be within
it
our
is an
rights
article.
to make such a presentation on the town's budget and say, you know, in lieu of another place on the warrant, we're gonna talk about the general feasibility of this town budget within the context of this sustainable growth rate that we've been discussing.
If not at the very beginning of the meeting,
Yeah.
then during our presentation on the town budget.
Yeah.
We would just ask to be heard on the town budget,
Yeah.
which would be the first time one of these recommendations would come
Come
up, I
up,
think.
yeah.
Okay, so
Tom, could you just real quickly just highlight, besides the benchmarks that we were going to use? I know there's a big discussion about which ones to use and to tie it to, whether CPI or T-bonds or something. What are would you say the other couple of big concerns are about moving something like this?
one that has been frequently expressed is in the form of a question, why a bylaw? The other has been, why discuss this with town meeting at all? You have the power to do this. You can do it as a committee if you wish to do it. Just do it, publish it. You don't need town meeting permission. So I would say those are the primary, the index chosen or the number, a bylaw versus a simple standing vote, and why anything. So, thank you.
And one other thing, and that was a bylaw binds future committees, and there was some concern that they didn't want to necessarily bind us in this way.
I think the other reason for bringing this up at town meeting is education, to educate as many people as possible of how their tax rate is tied to the budgets, and what the finance committee would be trying to do to hold things at a reasonable level. But education and communication is, I think, the main reason for getting it out. There's a captive audience of however many, but also people are going to be listening more at home. Hopefully, more involved this year.
So,
Yeah, I was just gonna say, rather than confusing the discussion of the town budget and other things with this, there is precedent. You would wanna pass this by the moderator, but it has happened before when an article is withdrawn, that the proponent of the article has still made a presentation to the town meeting at the time where that article would come up.
And that is
therefore,
true.
I think it would be very clear.
Yeah.
And I think the more we educate people about this,
all
the
right.
better it's gonna work. But you won't, obviously, Carmen was the,
So, are we ready for a vote?
Yes.
All in favor of Mary's motion?
Yes.
Unanimous. Great. No motion. All right, great. All right. Okay, we're down to Community Preservation Committee appropriations recommendation.
I'm going to keep this.
You have to recuse yourself, okay.
Somebody call me.
Did we do something on Article 16?
Yes, we did. We voted no action.
So I move that we support affirmative action on Article, I guess it's 22.
Okay, all right. Any discussion? Right.
The recommendation seemed reasonable.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're ready for a vote. All those in favor? Okay, once again, unanimous. Phil, come back. And Phil, why do I keep calling Phil? I think this must be, I must have had a stroke earlier or something.
I wanted to ask a question.
I'm not sure who seconded it.
Who seconded?
Call
That.
Carl. Or maybe
Phil
Gary.
made the motion.
This might
but-
be-
Dick, that's right, Dick did.
Yes, I did.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And that is, on the next one, 23, did we vote no action or to oppose?
We were no action.
No action, that's opposed.
Well, well, because there is a column for not in favor, and that's what was,
Yeah.
I was thinking, do we have,
Well, I think it was to vote to recommend no action, which was the same as being
Same
not
as-
in favor.
It's
the
same-
same
Same thing,
people
okay.
don't vote for it.
So, Dean,
Sir,
you take over for 5 minutes.
I can take over for 5 minutes.
Take it.
All right.
you found them?
Carl's back,
Yep.
but Tom's gone. So we're at the same staffing level. We're gonna try to dive in on number 24, which is the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I believe this is special legislation for the, let's see, this is the one where we're, for building permits, you'll be taxed on on a sliding scale depending on the
No,
size.
this was the fund that would hold
This is
money.
the fund? This is the trust fund?
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
This
this
is
is,
just a trust.
this is a very, okay,
But this goes
really-
with that.
What's
So this goes with,
It goes with any of the other ones which might pass.
Any of the
It's a
other three
repository for the funding.
Exactly.
oh, I see, this would be the repository for
Yeah.
the
So-
building piece. Okay.
So if any of the articles which raise affordable housing funds
Right.
pass,
Right.
those funds have to be put somewhere. This would establish a trust fund for it. It would establish a board to oversee those funds. That board would be responsible for creating a process through which the funds could be applied for and granted. Does that describe this article?
Yeah, I guess.
I guess I'm wondering why.
took my chair.
Sorry, I didn't give you the gavel, so I didn't know what else to do.
I asked this,
Had to keep it warm for you.
I asked this question at the hearing, and I don't think I really got a good answer, but how is this similar to or different from the Concord Housing Development Corporation, which has already been established and which has already raised and is spending the money for the Junction Village project? So I don't understand why we need this.
I'd have to go back to my warrant, but I believe the language in the warrant says that we can put these funds in the, in this thing or the CHDC, but I think we're really moving towards creating this specific, trust fund.
It doesn't say, the warrant doesn't say.
It doesn't say.
It does say, the explanation part says, the creation of the Concord Affordable Housing Trust will create a town entity that will manage revenues generated for affordable housing if Articles 25 and 26 are approved. So it presupposes that the money that comes in from those two articles would be put into this housing fund, this trust fund, and not the CHDC.
Wait, so why not?
So,
Do you know
I think that they're just
Well,
assuming that this
the
would.
CHDC is a separate corporation
Separate corporation.
of the, this is a town,
It's a private corporation.
a private corporation, separate
So-
private corporation.
In order to fund them, we would have to
They
have
would
separate
be,
appropriations.
an entity that would apply through whatever the grant process would be, to get the money, in other words, so that they could do their projects.
But this keeps the money in the
In the
town's
town.
jurisdiction.
Even though the CHDC
I
is
still
a
don't
town,
understand
It's a captive,
controlled
it's a
committee,
captive
or
thing.
corporation, isn't it?
Wait,
It's totally separate.
Oh, I thought we
Yeah,
appointed the
yeah.
people,
The funds don't come through the town,
but do we appoint the people?
yes.
The town appoints the people, so that's
the
why we need control.
CHDC, you're talking
They're
about.
not subject to
thank you.
open meeting law, there's a,
No,
it's
they
a
are. They
completely
are. No,
standalone.
they
They've got their own.
They are.
They are actually.
They are. Yes, they are. They are.
Anyways,
No,
I,
I'm positive they are.
Yeah,
because I was the observer
Um,
to that committee.
Okay.
my understanding is that these articles go together, 24, 25, and 26 all go together. So what we probably ought to do is discuss 25 and
That's
26.
a good idea.
And then if we
Yes.
approve either one of those, then we should approve Article 24.
Correct. And if we don't, then
Good idea.
there's no.
We have approved 26.
No,
You
we
approve
haven't.
26?
We voted for affirmative action.
Okay, then I move that we approve
Thank you.
Article 24.
Actually, Tom, I don't remember voting on 26.
I don't
I don't
remember that
either.
either.
And I had
And
no
I
written
read the
down also.
minutes. I read the minutes, and it's not in the minutes.
I thought we hadn't decided. I thought we got through 23,
We got to 23,
We got to
and then we
23.
no action.
and then
But we
didn't
haven't
have
done
enough
24,
time.
25,
Came
and
to
26.
24 and stalled, we thought it would be simple, but we just had 5 minutes and said no, so we stopped.
We haven't done 25 or
Or
26.
So we need to do those first.
Let's do it.
25. We're skipping 24.
25, the transfer tax.
No,
Transfer tax.
no, it wasn't, we didn't talk about this all on March 7th. So we didn't discuss it, we didn't approve it at the
We
town
haven't.
meeting that Anita was at.
Sorry, we
We
did.
didn't approve it at the
You
town
didn't
meeting.
approve it at the meeting that I was at. You started discussing it, lasted about 5 minutes, and it was late, and decided to put it off until,
Yep.
Okay, good, thank you.
So
Okay, so
let's move to 25.
25.
25.
Can we suggest to the moderator that she juggle the order and have 24 come after those other two articles, those other three articles?
Great idea.
I mean,
Makes sense.
it doesn't
Really
make
good
sense
idea.
to be out there approving a fund for which.
For which
three
there's no
things might
funding.
fail, right?
A vehicle for which
For
we're
for
not
which you may not have
Yep.
need.
any funding.
Yeah.
Correct.
So-
That's a good point.
So
Tom, if I can just comment on why the order is in the order. It's because we didn't want to have 24 and 20, or 25 and 26 approved, and then if you don't approve 24, you don't know where the money's going.
Okay.
So it was done in that order for that particular reason.
But I think that the same thing will happen at town meeting that happened here. People will say, what are we doing this for? And I think until they,
I think town meeting's brighter than you all. I wouldn't worry about that.
Right.
That's a pretty low bar.
I would just add both of them.
You know, I don't think there's any downside to approving the creation of this trust. And if it winds up being nugatory, don't you love that word? Then it doesn't really matter. So I don't really think this is worthy of extensive discussion.
well, I was gonna
So I would
suggest we
entertain
decide
a
it.
motion.
It's going to be a foregone conclusion if we approve 25 and 26.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion that we move affirmative action, recommend affirmative action on Article 24.
Second.
Carl, Phil,
It could be moved.
And a second?
Yeah, well, Carl.
Carl second.
Peter made it.
Peter
Peter
moved.
moved, Carl
Peter
seconded.
and Carl, okay.
It could be moved if we don't approve 25 and 26. So,
All those in favor?
okay.
You're right. But then no money, then they won't set it up.
All those opposed?
I abstain.
I abstain.
3 abstentions.
You'll abstain or?
Okay, the big one.
All right, so,
I'll, just to get the ball rolling, I'll move no action on 25. I actually intend to go, I think I'm going to support 26, but not
say
25.
that again, Phil, I couldn't hear what you said.
I move no action on, that we support no action on 25. And I'm just, as an aside, I say I would intend to move affirmative action on 26.
A second to Phil's motion?
So I will second his motion of no action on Article 25.
Okay. Discussion.
I actually support Article 25 because I think it's something we should put in front of the taxpayers and find out if in fact they are committed to affordable housing. And this would be a lucrative way to raise some money. It would raise, estimates are about $3 million a year. So I think it's appropriate that we put it in front of the town and see if, are we really committed? We hear a lot about affordable housing. This would be something that would actually make it a reality. It wouldn't be nickel and diming it. If we had some zoning, some creative zoning laws, we could also do something creative here and something innovative. And this is something that's discretionary, and by that I mean it's only triggered when people sell their homes. So I actually support this article.
Was it
Yes. The next one is.
Also, just in support of that there are a number of exemptions which kind of answer some of the effects that this might have on housing affordability, on market rate affordability.
So the state is also imposing a similar tax, are they not? Is it the same amount? Is it another 1%? So state plus town would be a 2% real estate transfer tax on the sale of a house?
If it passes, I mean, I don't, you mean the Baker administration is proposing?
Yes, they're proposing
A surcharge, a real estate, yes.
of also 1%.
I don't remember the percent.
1.5 is what
Well, right now it's 0.46, so I think they're gonna add an extra 1, so it gets it up to like 1.46. I think that's.
Yeah, I don't know.
So there are
You're
two.
right.
So there are two that we're kind of, well,
But to be clear on this one, this is authorizing the town to petition the state.
Yes,
That's correct.
That's right.
That's right.
So it would have to be approved by the state, in tandem with the Baker administration's asking for an increase, so.
So I guess my concern here is the total ask that these articles, in conjunction with each other, are trying to achieve by raising approximately $4 to $5 million. I can't think of another initiative in town which demands that level of funding. It's a very big ask. So I would be inclined to think about this one at a smaller number. That my thing is let's start out and see how it goes rather than just go for the whole hog. They're looking for $4 to $5 million between these three funding articles, and this one's going to generate 3 of them. So how about we? And my suggestion would be to dial it back by to 0.5%, and be hopefully raising $1.5 million. One of the problems I guess I have with it is it's a targeted thing that only hits a very small percentage of the taxpayers, and it hits them harder than any other tax we can contemplate. So you're raising a lot of money, and from a very select cohort of individuals mostly.
Whereas it represents a general good.
And it does represent a very general good.
Right.
So that's my suggestion, is just to make a recommendation of, well, we're still on this current motion. I guess I'd amend the motion. I'd offer an amendment to the motion that we recommend affirmative action at a 0.5%.
Is that a motion?
That's a motion. That's an motion to amend.
So it flips mine to,
Second.
my motion was to not action, but I'll accept your motion if that makes it easier to discuss it. I think we should proceed with Dean's suggestion as the motion on the floor. That is to approve affirmative action.
So you're withdrawing your motion.
Okay, I can withdraw my motion in favor of Dean.
Okay, so do we have a second for Dean's motion?
Carl seconded.
But what am I seconding? Are we, excuse me, so we are now, the motion is that we're going to be in favor of this in an amended form by.
We're in favor of.
So are we
we're in
trying
favor
to
of
do
this.
0.5%. No, it's just support. Same thing we do with the school motion, the school article. We're going to support affirmative action, but at the level of a 0.5% tax.
Okay, as long as it's.
You second it?
Yep. As long as it's clear.
Further discussion?
John, can you,
Oh,
are you
you just
withdrawing,
continue.
I guess, are you withdrawing?
Phil
your-
is withdrawing his.
I will, so I guess
I would-
mine's
Phil
not
withdrew it.
amended, mine
Phil
is
withdrew.
now the motion on the floor is
Needs a
to.
second.
But did John withdraw
But
his
John,
second?
would you please withdraw your
Your second.
second to Phil's iteration?
Sorry, yes, of course.
Thank you.
Sorry, I forgot that I seconded actually.
So,
We gotta keep with.
so my question is, I agree with your point earlier, Dean, that it's a targeted tax essentially, and I'm not really a fan of that. So whether it's at a point or 3 points or half a point, it doesn't sway me. So that the change of the amount doesn't help me with that issue.
So, I'll say, even though I'd support Dean's amendment because it's better than 1%, I'm against it because it's of fairness. It taxes a small number of people, and technically, I think it will reduce slightly real estate values for everybody because it causes an additional cost to alienate your real estate.
Can I answer the way I think the Affordable Housing Funding Committee would answer that? Because I went to many of their meetings, and I think that what they would say is that I think this tax, even though it's written that it will be paid by the buyer, will in fact be paid by the seller. If you know economics, that's what will happen. And there are
By the mechanism of the seller just raising the price by the amount.
exactly to cover it, right?
Adding to
Once the
the-
realtors realize that the buyers are going to have to come with 1% more, the mechanism will be able to raise the price But the meeting, but, where I was going with this is that their argument would be that if you want affordable housing in town, if you want diversity of housing in town, then the only way to get that is to raise funds. And this would be a way that you would raise funds by people moving into town. And if you were gonna buy an expensive house, then you would be proportionally contributing more to the diversity pool than a person who came in at a median level house, which would be the 800, well, what's the median level? Million one or something. So their thinking is that this would be, they would view it as a fair way of raising taxes because as people, the people who are selling, who have larger houses are going to be contributing more to the diversity, and the diversity, of course, would be on the low end. So they would be funding that. I think that was their.
And why not put a certain limit or an exemption, say, anything over $1 million, so that it's really the high end, which is causing us to lose more and more affordable housing than.
There is an exemption set at
For
the level
first time, yeah. For first time buyer.
I don't remember, Peter.
Well, $1 million is the median house value, so it's top half.
Right.
I wish I could look up the,
So,
the Affordable Housing Funding Committee.
so I'm not in the congress, I think Mary is, but, I'm not in the congress, and I think you are. But my impression of it is that it's still, whether it's just buyers paying it, if we assume a perfect market, it's gonna make us slightly more expensive than a town that has the same characteristics as Concord, but doesn't have this tax. So that's what I mean by it will affect everybody's property value slightly.
You also have a responsibility to have a more diverse population.
I support doing something, but not this way.
Yeah, the exemptions as far as first-time buyers in the first 5 years.
But it doesn't say you could be a first-time buyer buying a very expensive house.
doesn't.
You're coming from overseas.
You're right, it doesn't. So it's the time, not the amount.
Right. Yeah, the article, what was it, Charles, Philip, what was that?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
That, his was over a certain amount.
But this was the
Right.
building permit.
So I want to caution everybody that although it looks extremely short, the agenda is actually extremely long. And so we really need to be moving through these things a little more crisply. So can I? So, are we ready for vote?
On the motion, on
Dean's motion is to
amend down to
Affirmative action at 0.5%.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Okay,
Okay, so then I move, we approve Article 24, further action on Article 24.
Second.
any discussion? All in favor? Bill?
I'm abstaining.
Okay.
Okay.
So why not?
Sure.
Just trying to move things along.
Opposed? Abstaining?
Two. 802.
Right. Article 26. I think many of the same arguments obtain here.
Yes, I move that we support affirmative action on Article 26. My reason for this is it's a little more fair. It is people that are choosing to seek a building permit And that's a little bit more fair than people selling their existing house. So I support this as a way to raise funds for affordable housing.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
So I just asked, now that we have discussion, but does anyone recall what the funding committee's estimates were for the amount of money that they would raise through this mechanism?
$1 million.
Yeah,
Million.
900 to $1 million.
And that was annually?
Yes.
Yep. Any further discussion? We're ready for a vote. All those in favor?
Nope, nope.
Oh, sorry, I thought you had your hand up.
Opposed? Okay. Good. Right, so we're on to the next page. Now, this is where the really big money is, and these things should go really fast.
Zoning bylaw?
No, we're on 38.
38 through 45.
So we just had the public hearing on all these, right?
Right.
Can we vote these as a block?
I think, well, would you like to make a motion?
Which I would second.
I mean, I don't want to shortcut any questions or issues or discussions.
People can vote against your
I move that since we've just had a public hearing and gone into these in some detail, that we vote Articles 38 through 45 as one motion.
And affirmative action.
And affirmative action, correct.
I will second.
Any discussion?
So the only comment I guess I would want to make is that I would like to see in future years that the light plant be more forthcoming about their unrestricted cash balance. It's 2 years in a row. I've gone through this book. I've looked at their pro forma, and they show year over year that they're gaining $1.2 million, $1.4 million. This is real money, and they show something that they call a net balance. The net balance is they then describe as their fiscal assets.
So what you're asking
We should
for is a
require
detailed
a
balance.
balance sheet.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Just,
Yeah.
all I
Just-
want is that one extra line.
It's a
I
very
want
fair
have them
request.
just
Yeah.
divide out, I want, and when I asked the question at the meeting, they said they have $8 million in unrestricted cash
Yeah.
funds. That is just under what the town has.
Mhm.
What is the light plant doing with so much money?
You would probably get the same answer from them that you would get from the
Who observes the light?
Department of Public Works, like for water, where they're using that excess cash balance to take care of the Nagog Pond, that there are big overruns there because of the legal action.
That's the water plant.
That's the water, yes.
But what if, this is the light plant, has $8 million.
Well, and their argument would be that if something big comes up, that's gonna be their question. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I'm just saying what they would, their answer
Large.
would probably be.
I think it's all, didn't you say it's also sort of funded depreciation, right? So it's for things that they're gonna have to fix. I thought that was what he said. But I agree with you, we need a balance sheet.
Their net position, as I think this statement is net position, it increases every year.
Yeah.
It keeps increasing, and it increases by the amount of the, I guess I call them earnings.
So what is that not something that the Financial Audit Committee would look at?
Well, I'm not at all certain about this, but although they're not regulated by the DPU, I think they do have to make an annual filing, which I think includes a balance sheet.
Yeah.
So we should look into that.
Okay.
Carrie has,
I'm sorry, I just want to add something. The light plant is audited on an annual basis. They are on a calendar year basis. Their audit is presented to the Financial Audit Advisory Committee. It then goes to the Select Board. The balance sheet is available. It is, I know that the most recent audit, which is calendar year 2017, is online because I just looked for it the other day. So there is an awful lot of information that is available out there. The other thing that I would say is depreciation would be part of the restricted fund balance, not part of the unrestricted fund balance.
So it's not in the 8 million.
Right, so before you leave, Carrie, is the 8 million that I think I heard, is that what we think the unrestricted cash balance that they have is at this point? Their equivalent of free cash or E&D or whatever, there's all these different terms that we're using.
Right, so it's, for an enterprise fund, it's retained earnings
Okay.
is the same as free cash in the general fund. Honestly, without looking at the audit, I couldn't tell you if that's what it is, but if that was the answer that was presented, I know that, that Dave Wood is very familiar with the financial condition of the light plant, and if that's how he responded, I believe that's absolutely correct.
Okay, we're ready for a vote. We have a motion on the table. I think we're ready for a vote.
All right, all those in favor? Okay. Wow, that's wonderful. Okay. Now, Ms. LaFleur, you would help guide us through this next exercise. Is that fair?
The next exercise
The next
being what's
exercise being the-
remaining, what's remaining to be completed in the.
Exactly.
So at this point in time, the Finance Committee report is in good shape with the exception of the update on both Concord Public Schools and CCRSD. That's really what is outstanding at this point in time. I am happy to do a little bit of additional work, but what is contained in those sections really is the opinion of the Finance Committee in terms of what items are of interest to flag within the budget request. So that is something that really would be outside of my updating.
So can I make a suggestion about that? So we have basically a subcommittee that has been observing the schools. So Tom and Dean, John, me, and
Carl.
Jim, and Carl. And I suggest that Tom delegate the revisions to those sections to that members of that subcommittee in the next 24 hours, and that we divvy that up and then collectively get that in.
Well, let's do it right now.
So can I clarify one point, Dean? I thought you had done the introduction and the CPS portion.
I did. And I hand the hard copy to Tom, and I can deliver the soft copy to Carrie anytime.
So CPS is done.
Oh, okay, I
CPS
wasn't
and the
aware.
intro, there's some intro paragraphs and CPS. And so that included the CPS capital, $900,000 capital plan within the town manager's budget was included. There was one piece of that that I don't know where to get the data, and that is there's a sentence in there that says population of the school of the CPS, is flat, even, is this new number, and I just don't know where to go
Okay.
to get that.
All right, I
ClearGov.
guess I didn't realize that work had been done,
ClearGov,
so.
right? And there were two.
Okay, I'll look.
You like ClearGov?
Yeah, I don't know.
I got it right here. What time is it? So the other thing that we discussed the other night was two additional segments that we might want to add had to do with A, the feasibility study, and B, the whole parking CCH capital project issue.
I think the two
So-
separate bold headers for those two articles would be prudent just to have. And I think that these should be offered in a fairly moderated way. Like, if the town votes to do this, this is what it will mean.
Okay, I will volunteer to do those two additional sort of newish categories if that helps get the ball rolling.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. Now, will someone edit that for me or collaborate on it, or am I just gonna do it and
Okay,
send it to you?
so the timetable is by the end of the weekend at the absolute latest. This
Oh, you shouldn't
document
have
is
said
going to the
You should
printer.
have said that.
It's going to the
Right.
printer on Monday
All right,
in
I'm
the
gonna do
shape
mine
that it's
tomorrow.
in.
Right.
All right?
So why don't you circulate it to our subcommittee?
That's exactly what I'll do. I'll write it and I'll circulate it.
Wait, now is that,
Edits
Is
will have
that
to go into
permitted? Is that a
Carrie.
deliberation?
You can circulate it, but the edit should come directly to me and not
Right.
be researched.
I will send it to everyone, and then people will respond solely to Carrie.
Okay.
Are there other sections
And so-
that would be drafted?
CCHS needs, there's 2 or 3 paragraphs, and it would probably revolve around the budgetary things that they struggle with. OPEB versus E&D, whether or not to buy versus lease their laptop program. The things that really were the drivers of their decision process would be helpful to have in those paragraphs. It's just, that's off the top of my head.
All right, if nobody else wants to do it, I'll do the CCHS, and I'll do the same procedure.
Great.
I'll get it by the end of the day tomorrow, and comments will go to Carrie.
Please edit mine heavily.
Yeah, the thing that drove the commentary last year, I think, Phil, was the big swing in population and how that really hammered us, but I don't think that's as
the
relevant this
assessment,
year.
you mean?
But the CCHS narrative, last
So the
year.
big swing was the assessment between Concord and Carlisle,
Yeah.
not the
Yes.
overall enrollment, is that your?
No, yeah, it was assessment because of the change in ratio.
In the ratio.
The ratio change really was a big driver of the conversation.
We can get a lot of this information from the slides. that they-
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's exactly how I did mine.
Can I ask a clarifying question just for the minutes? John agreed to do the 2 segments that, was the feasibility study and the parking at the high school.
Yeah,
Yes.
he meant,
But-
I think
but-
he put Article 18 or
But-
16,
but-
Article 16.
Those are 2, but the parking is part of the high school, it's a different article. But Phil, you're doing OPEB and E&D.
But he's doing the CCHS narrative, which
Budget.
will include discussion of their OPEB and their E&D
Right.
and their.
So I'm doing Article 15, John is doing Article 16 and Article 14.
14 and 16, okay, gotcha.
And would you like to include anything about Article 18?
In the report?
Yes, we should. Yes, we should.
I think we should,
Yeah.
yes.
I think you should get the Randall curve in, whatever the most recent Randall curve is, as a reason for why we came up with this. And then some of the reasons you proposed at the very beginning of the year, if you know, we should do this.
Yeah, I'm actually not comfortable including the Randall curve as such. I've come to believe that the Randall curve isn't truly representative of what we want to express. I think really the,
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I thought that was part of the impetus for doing this, but whatever you think, I think
Yeah.
Tom should do it
I mean,
if you can. do it.
partly because the Randall curve, at least insofar as town acreage goes, is based upon the median tax bill. And the median house value has outstripped CPI and Social Security COLA. And that's a big reason why the median tax bill has increased like that. I think I've come to believe, and I'm welcome to anybody else's input, that the level of taxation, the total tax, is a much more indicative.
Yes.
I agree.
I just thought that was a good way to explain it, but
Total
you
tax
were much more
capitals and-
in a
Right.
position than probably any of us.
Good. Let's see, I have a question. I haven't been through the entirety of the report that you sent, but I do have a question about town expenditures and what they include. We've had a lot of discussion around this table about the use of stabilization funds and other for lack of a better term, grants to the town to support personnel. And I'm wondering where we refer to increases in expenditure, if we include those contributions from those funds in the increase in expenditure.
So that's,
So I'm not sure how to think about that either, but Tom, do you mean things like debt stabilization payments also would be included as expenditures? Because the issue that I thought came up was we were talking about effectively two quite different, forms of
No, I
stabilization.
don't, actually, no, and I specifically,
I got the muse stabilization.
Yeah, right.
that's one,
Yeah,
that's one.
and is the thrust of your argument that it's masking the true growth of
Yes.
spending
Yes,
It's,
in the town?
right.
right.
Well, it's creating future overhang that we would be picking up the tab.
Right.
I think you're saying the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I'm speaking specifically about instances where the use of those funds goes to personnel cost rather than to capital cost. It affects the town's overall position in one way if it goes to buy a piece of capital equipment like a fire engine or an ambulance, but in quite a different way if it goes to hire for new employees.
You think it makes it easier to hire people than we would be more reluctant to hire those people if we didn't have
It
the
masks,
free.
Yes.
it masks the
Money,
effect.
yeah.
Right.
It defers the true cost.
The true-
Whereas usually it's used to kind of take the top off of some item that declines over time. This actually does just the opposite.
Right.
It reduces in the short term, and really pushes
Which makes
the,
it more palatable.
which makes it more palatable.
The free
Short term.
introductory
So the
rate.
question, it's not a transparency issue that it was thought to be, but it's really an accounting treatment issue. It
Right, and we won't get into it now, but in some future meeting, we'll have on the agenda a discussion about how we want to change our practice. Because in his answer to a question I asked last week, the town manager reminded me that it has always been the practice to not include those contributions in guideline spending. I think we ought to seriously consider officially changing that practice because of the masking effect that it has. So that's something.
I would open it up even further to redefine what's included in guideline spending. I mean, not just bring in
Sure,
one,
sure.
but
Okay.
when I've been looking at documents, it's really unclear to me what determines what is and what isn't in guideline spending. So maybe we want to broaden
Okay.
what's included in
Well,
guideline.
depending on what our agenda looks like for the 28th, we might have that on our agenda for the 28th. Okay. Any other, so we're not as bad off as I thought we were gonna be.
I do have just a couple of quick comments that came out of meetings that I attended last night. Planning Board and Department of Public Works. And this goes to, I want to do Department of Public Works first because it goes to something that Phil had talked about with the cost of the road in front of the BD Center. And I asked Rich Rain about that, if he had been consulted. He mentioned he would call him as well. He said that they looked at it not a thorough, full-blown comprehensive study or anything, but he said they came up with a couple of reasons why it seemed to be so expensive. One was that the cubic yards, they said when you're doing a road, the expense of the material is measured in cubic yards. And they came up with a different measurement for cubic yards than what the contractor proposed to the school did. That the school contractor had a much bigger number, so Rich Rain didn't know if they were proposing to widen the street in front of BD, but he didn't know. He also said that the contractor proposed a much thicker road, which Rich Rain didn't understand. He said it's one thing if you're going to have, tractor trailers going 60 miles an hour. That road, the contractor's road would support that, but he said he didn't compensate. So those were the two big
Yes,
things.
so just to add on that, so that's what jumped out at me. The specifications were what you would have for a superhighway like Route 2 or 495, which has heavy truck traffic. But 5 inches of road, 5 inches of gravel, I'm sorry, and then 4 inches of asphalt on top of that. Completely unnecessary in my view. I think they could do a mill and overlay. I've actually been there and walked over every inch of that, and there's just one pothole I saw, and a couple of places where they cut the street down by the stadium to put in probably some sort of utilities or something. But, you know, for the public works, you need a road a lot worse than that to rebuild in its entirety. So, yeah, they're looking, I mean, they could do it for like $200,000, I think.
So
Not- not
there's
1.2 million.
clearly enough discrepancies to warrant further investigation. The interesting thing that came out of the planning board was that Concord's population is growing. It's up over 16,000 now, but it's skewing towards older residents. So that was the takeaway from that.
Without the prison, 16,000?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't remember whether that was with or without the.
I think it's without.
I think it's
I
without.
think it's more like 20.
Yeah.
The prison population is much smaller than I thought it was.
It used to be like 3,000.
I thought it
I thought it was more
numbered
like
into
20.
thousands and it doesn't.
Well, I'm looking at 2017.
It's down to about 1,000.
About 1,000?
Really?
I was just there last week.
That's including the farm?
It's down a lot from, it was over, about 1,500 in 2010, and it has gone down a lot since then. And I was just there that last week, and they confirmed those numbers.
Okay. All right, any other?
I just have a comment. You might have seen today's Concord Journal. There was a front page article on how the town raises money, written by one of their staff writers, I guess. Did anybody see that?
Yes.
Yeah, the front page article in the Concord Journal was how the town raises money through either fees or property tax. And again, it was written by a staffer, and I'm thinking maybe we should call them and ask them if we can be putting articles on the front page about how we spend money.
I just have a process question. So I read through not all, but most of the draft finance committee report. So I know I have a couple edits to my own section. So if we have edits, if I have a few ideas in the tax projection, Dean, which I thought was excellent. I have a few things. Do we send that? How do we do that? Or how does the process of the book
I
come
think
together?
properly you should send them to Carrie.
To Carrie, okay.
You can do any minutes?
Oh, yes, I move that we approve the minutes that were attached to the agenda, which is
February 11th.
February 11th. Is that it?
That's it.
As written.
I didn't read them.
I haven't read them either. We can always,
I read it.
so Anita, what's the process if I go home and read these?
Then you can't change it. So
That's what?
you have to come back to another meeting
So
and
I withdraw
Yes.
my
undo
motion.
it. So
I withdraw my motion, and we can put it on the agenda for
I'll
next.
read them next time.
I was going to defer all of the approvals until the 28th. Okay. Hearing no other business, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, all those in favor, please leave.